Going on, Jeromes? Beautiful Monday. Birds are chirping and stuff, and it's time for another session of Vikings Q&A. Thank you, everyone who submits questions. Community tab, occasional callouts. You know what it is. First up, Swifty. Nailed it. What teams do you think will fall apart or massively exceed expectations? So, exceed Vikings. I think the Buccaneers are going to be good again, which I understand. They're a little bit older. They did bring back Mike Evans. They did bring back Baker Mayfield, and I feel like Todd Bowles has done a very good job with the Bucs. It's like, yeah, you won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady, but they've won the division 3 years in a row. And I know that the Falcons are going to get all the hype, but it wouldn't shock me at all if the Bucs win the division again, probably at 8 or 9 or 9 or 8. The Chargers, so I know that everyone has lowered expectations with the Chargers because of the purge at wide receiver, but whatever. So whatever. Herbert's still going to be a stud. Harbaugh's going to play Harbaugh ball. Their offensive line is going to be legit. I actually really like Kamani Vidal as a deep fantasy sleeper, and I think the Chargers are going to play tough. I think they legit are going to be tough. The Colts, I can't wait to see Anthony Richardson back. Anthony Richardson. So if the Vikings have found a way to trade up heaven and earth from 23 and 2023 and got Richardson, man, baby. Now, don't get me wrong. Fully happy with J.J. McCarthy, but I think Anthony Richardson is going to be an absolute star in this league. The Panthers mainly exceed because I feel like their expectations are just like so low. All right, so they're about as high as Bryce Young's height, but I feel like with some essentially better offensive line, getting Robert Hunt in the mix, some better weapons. I love the Xavier Leggett pickup. I mean, maybe Bryce Young gets things going. Plus, I think Canlis is going to do some very good things too. So there you go. The Cardinals, I kind of like what Monty Ossenford is doing out there. So you got yourself Darius Robinson on the D-line. You got yourself Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously. And I feel like the Cardinals are going to be super interesting going forward. And I don't have a big-time belief in Kyler, but I feel like as someone who just can say, F it, Harrison Jr. is down there somewhere. Yeah, I can see it. Raiders, they play hard for Antonio Pierce. And I'm never going to discount Max Crosby, plus adding Christian Wilkins. I think they're going to be defense forward. Offensively, I mean, Aiden O'Connell, Minshew, meh. But Brock Bowers is going to be legit. Devonta Adams still has a little something. So I think the Raiders could be pretty interesting. Plus, I like Zamir White at running back. Falls apart, the Eagles. I'm just not buying the Eagles brand. And also offensive line-wise, I feel like losing Kelsey is going to be a lot larger than people think. Not just because he's still good physically, but also the way that he lined up that offensive line, made the calls, leadership up front. The Cowboys, yeah. Lions, well, I feel like their expectations are up here. I think the Lions will be good, except will they win the division? I wouldn't wager on it. Falcons, I mean, everyone's kissing the Falcons' ass right now, but I'm worried about Kurt and that Achilles on his plant foot. The Bills, yeah, I think that window might be closed. But although I hope Keon Coleman is good because I want more of him in the media because he's hilarious. I love him, man. The Browns, I just don't see it with Deshaun Watson. I think they should honestly find themselves a different quarterback. And then the Bears, I mean, people expecting the Bears to go 9-8. I don't know, man. Next, Ethan Eplet. Who are trade candidates if Kwesi wants to make a move in the season and acquire a second-round pick in next year's draft? Now, I know people are going to say, you're sure to trade Brian O'Neill. But I'm legitimately thinking about players who meet the parameters of a veteran trade as well as could fetch decent draft capital. Because it's like you're not going to trade Lewis Cine for a second-round pick. You just aren't, right? But O'Neill, I mean, it could be a spot where O'Neill, like he's one of the last remaining, big contracts from the Spielman regime. They didn't restructure him, so that could potentially be a sign that they would want to move him at some point. And he is getting up there towards 30, has had injury issues, but for my money, he's still a top 5 right tackle. But, I mean, if a team inquires, and if the Vikings are, say, really in love with Walter Rouse, the offensive tackle rookie from Oklahoma, maybe. Other trade candidates, Patrick Jones second could be the odd man out since the Vikings went really hard in the paint on the defensive side of the ball in the edge rushing room. And also Andrew Booth Jr., maybe because, yeah, he was number 42 overall. And, of course, other teams are like Mama, I can change him situation. Of course, he could be lost in the mix as well in that cornerback room. Next, Eric Anderson, is Dalton Risner destined to end up like Josh Klein, where we keep wondering why he's not re-signed before he just fades into obscurity? So, for reference, Josh Klein was a free agent guard the Vikings picked up in 2019. He actually played pretty well. He did have a concussion, did miss some time, but was eventually cut. I guess that had like a 3-year deal. So he was cut in 2020, didn't play, and then he just retired. Like 2019 was his last year in the NFL. Now, it was interesting because he was relatively young. So it could be like injury or medical related that people didn't know about, but he was solid. Was he spectacular? Was he all pro? No, but was he better than the average guard the Vikings have had over the last couple of years? Yes, and that does apply to Dalton Risner. But with Risner, this is the second year in a row where he's not on a 90-man roster after the draft, which is perplexing, which is puzzling, because he was solid 4-year starter at left guard for the Broncos. Last year, he was decent for the Vikings. So we'll see. But I do believe that the Vikings, they want to see what the offensive line looks like at OTAs, a mandatory minicamp, and maybe if guys like Brandel or Ingram or Juergens or Rouse or Feeney or whoever, like things are panning out on the inside, maybe they pay up for Risner. Maybe that's a contingency plan in that spot. Next, ENF. When, in your opinion, should JJ start listening to him talk to the media? He seems like a really smart kid who loves football and says all the right things. If he completes the daily checklist Kevin McConnell has for him, do you see him starting right away? What's better to sit and take the league in, or start and get in game risk because he's so young? Either way, I'm fired up for him whenever he gets on the field. Well, I guess it's going to be part and parcel of what happens with Darnold, because I do think that Darnold has inside track, because Kevin O'Connell has always been very cautious and conservative by nature when it comes to things like getting rookies on the field or having players come back from injury. And O'Connell's talked about the checklist that McCarthy has to go through. But I feel like McCarthy, he's a mature kid. He's going to put in the work. And I feel like, he'll make mistakes, but he'll learn from them. And also, the fact that O'Connell specifically told him to push the boundaries and stretch the envelope a little bit at rookie camp. I think he'll do the same at OTAs. But it's a spot where McCarthy could look so impressive at training camp and in preseason that it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. And that's not even an aspersion on Sam Darnold. I think Darnold does have the inside track. I think it's like 60-40 that Darnold will start week 1 as right now. And Darnold, surrounded by good coaching and good weapons, I think that he could pan out on some of his potential as well. So it's a good spot where we said this a bunch, where you have a quarterback competition where both guys are good, as opposed to both guys just being mid or ass. Thank you. Lastly, Life Vest. Would you ever come to Milwaukee for a game day Jerome meetup? We have a decent group that meets once per month. Skull. We would do it when the Packers have to play half their home games in Milwaukee because they can't draw in Lambeau. It's coming. It's coming. Although Milwaukee's a fun city. Not gonna lie, where it's got everything that you want from Chicago, but not in Chicago. That sort of deal. I always call Milwaukee like the northernmost Chicago suburb, but Milwaukee is a very fun town. Great restaurant scene, great beer scene, obviously. Also, they got the season Top Chef is in Milwaukee, and the wife and I are like huge Top Chef nerds, so it'd be interesting. But I feel like, they could play an NFL game at Miller Park, right? I feel like that's coming. So we'll see. Maybe it won't be a game day one, since Vikings game day, I'm always just like here in the office. Got the multiple games on, sweating the jelly bean wagers, sweating the fantasy teams, but we'll see. But that's it. That's Q&A on this beautiful Monday. You guys are the best you know what to do. Skol, production value.